welcome everyone to Today in the Scene by Indie Arcade Wave. I'm Joe, your host, and here on In the Scene, we dive into what's happening in the arcade space from arcade operators and owners, new indie developers, and just news in the space in general. A few things to dive into before we start. We've got the new t-shirts, we've got the Galactic Battleground shirt, another Galactic Battleground shirt, the Indie Arcade Wave shirt, and we also have two models of Galactic Battleground available for sale now, the 4-player tabletop and the 4-player Konami style, which I will add that link to the description, so you can go check those out. Now, let's dive into this week's episode. We've got an arcade owner that I've been talking to for quite a while, coming all the way from the Sunshine State, joining us to talk about his arcade, Retrovolt Arcade, in Calimesa, California. The owner, Bob Elson, joins us today to talk about the story of his arcade. How you doing today, Bob?
I'm doing okay, man. It's an early morning, but I'm doing okay.
Yeah, this is definitely an early morning interview, a little bit earlier than we usually do, but
Sure.
it's when it works, so we're gonna make it
Absolutely.
work. I guess just to jump into it, Bob. Obviously, you're the owner of Retrovolt Arcade. I want you to introduce yourself and let us know what your earliest memory of an arcade is.
Okay. My name's Bob Elson. I'm the owner of Retrovolt Arcade out here in Calimesa, California. I'm originally from the UK. Moved out to the States in '97. My earliest memory of the arcade would have to be probably 1980, 1981. Place called Blackpool in England, which is a seaside resort. I think it was like 6 or 7 years old. My mom and dad took me there, and they just had huge arcades there. And I remember just walking in and just the noise and the smell of the arcade. I was immediately hooked. I'm thinking the first game I remember playing was probably Boot Hill. I think that's the Midway title. The two cowboys going up and down. You've got two controls, one to go up and down with a cowboy, one to move the gun. Um, I spent a lot of time playing that, a lot of money playing that. Traditional sort of Pac-Man, asteroids, everything like that. But also at that time, there was a lot of like EM games still around, like EM light gun games. I remember being completely obsessed with those as well. One in particular called Gangbusters, which I just loved. I thought it was like the best game ever. So yeah, pretty early on, I guess.
Yeah, I really like those electromechanical
I
games. I
love
think
them.
that
I love them.
I feel like they're really underrated and you don't
Yeah.
see them very often. There's this place in St. Paul near me
Hmm.
called Can Wonderland, and they really focus on the old
Oh,
stuff. Like they've
dude.
got like 70s electromechanical, like flying
Yeah.
helicopters, gun games. I think
Oh yeah,
it's really
stunt
sweet.
pilot, all that kind of
Yep.
thing. Yeah, I could. There used to be the Banning Museum of Pinball out here in Banning, which is probably 10 miles down the street from us, and that unfortunately closed a couple of years ago. But John over there had a really, really, really nice collection of EM stuff. Especially the light gun stuff. There was a Sega title there, which was super cool. I'd never seen from like about 1968. I'd spend hours playing that rather than playing the brand new Sterns and stuff like this. So yeah,
Yeah, I
wish
mean
I wish I could have been here.
you can find the Sterns everywhere. That's a game that you probably
Yeah,
only
that's
see
true.
one location.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about Retrovolt Arcade.
Sure.
How did that start? Did you start collecting the games first and then open an arcade, or were you kind of leaning towards I want to start an arcade, let's find the games?
I had a small collection to start with. I think it was like 4 or 5 pins and 5 arcade cabs. And the reason I was collecting back then was that I've always like been into electronics and messing with stuff, fixing things. And back then you could pick up. I mean, I think I picked up my Demolition Man pinball for like $600, back then, and it was wrecked, but you know, kind of went through and fixed it, and I was kind of doing it for just relaxation more than anything. I'd come home from work at night and then just go in the garage and work on my pins and stuff like that. And then I was a IT guy for like 20 years, and I sort of decided I had enough of working where I was working, and I was tinkering around on my machines one night, and my wife said, um, "You ever thought about opening an arcade?" And this was like 8 years ago, and I was like, "Ah, no way. Arcades don't exist anymore." Well, obviously, a quick Google search, and you find that they do. So I was like, well, we'll give it a go, and here we are, 8 years later.
That's really funny that you mention fixing the pinballs in your garage as a
Yeah.
relaxation thing when
Oh
everybody
yeah.
talks about how frustrating it is to own a pinball because there's
No,
so
I
many
love it, man.
problems with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that like hands-on, you just
Hmm.
like you're completely focused in the moment and there's nothing else going on. So
No,
I
absolutely.
totally get that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I see you guys have tons of parties. Like I was looking at your reviews on your website of people basically
Mhm.
talking about it. Your staff is super attentive and really nice.
Thank you.
Were these like was this a plan from the beginning to have a party room when you opened the arcade, or was that something that came later?
No, it wasn't at all. In fact, we sort of delved back a little bit when I started like really deciding that I was going to do an arcade and everything like this. I was like, okay, now I need to buy a bunch of machines. Started buying machines. Obviously, quickly ran out of space at home, so I found like a small warehouse sort of workshop area that I could use. Started putting all that together, buying more machines, working on things full time, getting ready for this spot, and then we opened that spot as like a pop up arcade just to see if people were interested. And we were only open like every other weekend. And as we were doing it, someone came in and said, "Can I have a birthday party?" And we were like, "I guess you could," you know. So we kind of made up the pricing on the spot, and we did a birthday party there. And then when we came to this location in Calimesa, it wasn't big enough for a party room. It was only 2 units together at the time. And so we were like, if you want to have a birthday party, we can set like a table up for you. There won't be any extra charge. And that kind of people still came and did that. And then I was like, oh man, okay. So there was a business next door to us that was shut down actually because it was they were doing like the illegal gambling internet cafe thing. I guess they got shut down, and we were like, okay, well, we'll take that spot, and we turned that into a party room, and that quickly became for us kind of a really good financial boon for us, to be honest with you. And then in 2020, which is when we signed the lease, a re-up on this lease for 5 years, and we just expanded to that. That was January of 2020. Of course, we all know what happened in March of 2020. We were closed down for, I think it was like 13 months, and we just worked on the room and tried to keep the place going. Um, and then we were allowed to open up for small parties, and the parties basically saved us, basically, along with a couple of other things, selling a few pins and that, which I kind of regret, but we had to do it. Um, so it's kind of become a big deal for us, really, because everything from kids' birthday parties to corporate team building, family get-togethers, anything like that. We've had all kinds of events here, and it's been extremely good for us. And it wasn't something that I kind of foresaw or planned for at the beginning. At the beginning, it was just like, let's open an arcade and have people come and play Pac-Man.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at your pricing and everything, it seems really reasonable. It was two 250 for the base party, right, which is 15 people,
Yeah,
or less, I guess, and then every person you
yeah,
add on top of that is only $17. So
yeah.
that
It,
seems really reasonable to be able to come and play the games. You
well,
you do
it's
like an all day thing, right? If you purchase that
yeah.
17, but
So we're only open to the public for what we call general admission Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're in kind of a small town here, kind of like out in the sticks, out towards Palm Springs. But if you can book a party on a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, it's still the same price, but you have the entire arcade to yourself. I mean, if I didn't own this place, I'd be doing that deal with my friends at least a couple of times a year, just to come down, have the entire place to yourself, and play whatever you want. Then on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you still get the room back there and access to all the games which cost are on free play. And away you go. You can bring your birthday cake and your sodas and whatnot.
yeah, I always love the idea of like the pay to get in, free play, and then the
Hmm.
fact that you have like bring your own food as long as it's not
Yeah,
alcohol. That's the only rule on that. But you
yeah,
can bring anything you want to hang out with
yeah,
your
yeah, for sure.
friends for whatever, and I think that's awesome. So
Yeah,
we spoke a little bit about your history of the arcade, like right in the beginning.
sure.
What are your top five arcade games of all time? And I know you mentioned it might be some pinballs, which that's definitely
Yeah,
cool. But
I'll
where
try
where
and
do you
mix it
lie
up.
with those five?
Well, excuse me. Initially, I guess when my sort of best memories and earliest memories, I guess, of playing arcade games were always seemed to be like Atari based for some reason. I guess the arcade where I was had a lot of Atari games back in the day, so I started collecting like Ataris mainly, like a vector game. So you can probably see behind me the Retrovolt is a direct rip from the Gravatar marquee. So that's one of my favorite games of all time. As difficult as it is and as punishing as it is, that's a really cool game. Atari Star Wars. Remember getting in that cockpit when I was a kid and literally thinking I was Luke Skywalker. I'm thinking games cannot get any better than this. So that's definitely got to be in there. I think, good grief, yeah, this is difficult.
It's never an easy
It's
question.
never an easy question. Yeah. Ugh. Probably Major Havoc. Major Havoc's a great game. I love that game to death. For pinball, they have to be Williams. Hang on. Yeah, Indiana Jones Pinball Adventure probably, and probably. Oh God. Well, if the place was on fire today, the first machine I'd pull out would be Circus Voltaire. So Circus Voltaire will throw that in there too.
Yeah, I think that's you kind of had a mix there, like what you got now, what you played in the
Yeah.
past. Like I think the cockpit Star Wars is like,
Oh,
I
dude.
totally agree. It's one of the coolest games. When you see
Yeah.
it, you like
Yeah.
you can't help but to play it. You have to sit down in that and like at least play it one time.
Yeah.
And
I
they're
remember.
fairly hard to find nowadays too.
I've got a stand-up version here, and I passed on a cockpit version that was an auction a couple of months ago, and I was like, I don't need a cockpit version, and it went for what I thought was an incredibly low price at the time, and I'm still kicking myself that I didn't pick it up and then sell this version because I remember that day just sitting down in that thing, and I think I blew through the entirety of my allowance that day just on that one game. Just it was amazing.
Definitely understandable. I mean, that's a good
Yeah.
game to spend your allowance on.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were repairing pinballs to start everything off. How did you get into pinball repair?
When I was a kid, my mom she worked for a defense contractor back in the UK, and she was, you know, stuff that she still can't speak about to this day. I don't know what it is that she did, but she was into electronics and knew how to solder, wiring diagrams, all this type of stuff. And so, literally, for a Christmas one time, she bought me a build your own circuits present. And at the time, I was like, well, I wanted action. I wanted a GI Joe, but uh, I started getting into that when I was very, very young, like just understanding circuit theory and doing this type of stuff. And then that turned into is your RC car not working? I can fix it. Is your stereo not working? I can fix it. So as a kid, I kind of had like the side hustle of fixing VCRs and anything that broke for extremely cheap money, so then I could go spend it at the arcade. So I've always been sort of like into sort of repairing stuff, and then I got into repairing games just because I found one for cheap, and I was like, oh, I like pinball. I love pinball. I love repairing stuff. This seems like a good match. So yeah, that's pretty much how I started.
Yeah, that seems like a perfectly logical progression. You
Oh
figure
yeah,
out
dude.
circuitry, and then it just
Yeah,
adds to the arcade, so you can play more, and then they just
yeah,
intersect, and now
exactly.
you're fixing arcade
Yeah,
games.
yeah, for sure.
So obviously you've got a pretty sizable collection there. Most of the arcade owners I talk to also have some in stores they're working on. They want to bring out later.
Yeah.
What games are you still looking for to add to the arcade, or just to add to like your own private collection?
Um, so when I first started off, I was like, I have to have A, B, and C game, and go through, and I have to have this list, and I had this list of games. Literally wrote out a list of stuff I wanted, and I was like, okay, we'll do that, and we'll go through. And some of them were successful in the arcade, some of them weren't, that kind of thing. And when I first started, we were very sort of like 80s, centric, I guess. Um, but as you go along, you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to get rid of this Black Widow from Atari, which I really hate doing. I'm gonna have to get rid of Gravatar, which I really, really hate doing, because basically they're just sitting there burning electricity. Now, so I kind of got away from the idea that I have to have, I don't know, Golden Axe. I'm just pulling it out my bum, but or a specific title. What I kind of tend to do is I'll look around for what's for sale, and I'll think, you know what, that's a bit different, or this would be a cool title. I'll talk to my staff, particularly Ernie, who works here, and we'll talk about games, and we'll like, yeah, maybe we should look for I don't know, Fist of the North Star or something like that. So I don't have a particular list of games that I'm like, we must have this. I need this to complete. And of course, I don't view this as a collection anymore. What I did, so I don't have that sort of like completionist sort of aspect to it anymore. It's kind of, these are my games. This is the experience of Retrovolt. Would it be cool to have a Rolling Thunder here for a few weeks? That kind of thing. That's really where I'm at.
I think that's a great way to look at it. Because yeah, some arcades are very collection focused, and obviously
Sure,
like it's nice to take your collection and make money on it and have a
sure,
business and a lifestyle after that.
absolutely.
But it also is very important to have games that are going to get played. I
Hmm.
mean, like when I just spoke with Jeremy Fox last week, he was talking about how there are games that he put on the floor and they didn't
Hmm.
perform, even though he loves them.
Yeah,
So he
yeah,
pulled
for
them
sure.
off and put a game that did a little bit better. So
Yeah, it was
um,
funny listening to that. I actually listened to Jeremy's thing there. I don't know Jeremy, but he seems like a cool dude. But I was like, man, that's wow. I either sound like Jeremy or Jeremy sounds like me. I'm not sure which, but it was kind of interesting. But what I like to do with my games as well, and you can't really see it, but I'll put like when we opened up, people are like, well, you one guy said you have to have everything in alphabetical order, or the year it came out or whatever. And I'm like,
right,
it's not a museum. So what I'll literally have. I don't know, Torpedo Alley right next to Foo Fighters one week, and we'll kind of move things around because I want people to be like stood waiting for Foo Fighters, and they're like, "Oh, hang on a minute, what's this?" And then go and play that. You know what I
right.
mean? So we find that that sort of like spreads it out. And it's the same with the arcades as well. We don't have like a this is 1970, this is 1980s, this is we kind of mix it up. Street Fighter is going to be right next to Road Blasters, that kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah, I like both models. Being able to see like
Sure.
obviously you go to some places they have all their driving games together, all their fighting
Hmm.
games together.
Yeah, I get
I
that.
think it's definitely cool when you have like hundreds of games because it makes it easier to
Yeah,
focus it in. But
sure.
when you have a smaller collection of like
Hmm.
50, 60 games, having them
Yeah.
all mixed in is awesome because you never know what's around the next corner.
No, exactly, and that's where we're at. I think we're about 60 right now in this configuration. We're about 65 cabs and 20, 19, 20 pinballs, something like that. But it just
Okay.
depends how we set up.
Yeah, definitely a solid collection, sizable arcade. You can spend plenty of time there,
Oh
but you
yeah,
don't feel like you have to be there for like 3, 4, 5 days straight to see
right, right,
everything.
exactly,
It's
100%.
not like a Galloping Ghost experience where you have like
No,
900
I, w-
games and you're
I
never
wish
gonna
it
make
was.
it.
I wish this was the Galloping Ghost. What an awesome place that looks like.
It
I've never
it,
been, but I always want to go. So
it can be. You never know. Time will tell, right?
I don't know, man. I think I'm a little bit late on that one.
All right, let's talk about indies. I know that we've spoke about them a little bit before in the past. What
Mhm.
do you think about the indie game space, and what games are you looking at to add to your collection in the future?
So I think the indie gaming space is super, super exciting. I love the idea that people are, because we talked a little bit before we came on here, and obviously I'm a big PC gamer too. So I've always loved like the indie bundles and stuff like that. But to see people developing stuff for the arcade, sorry, John Luke Picard shouting at me. I don't know if that's cut me off. But to see people developing stuff for the arcade, I think super super exciting. I'm not 100% up on it. In fact, I only really started looking at the indie scene for the arcades when we started talking. And I don't remember how we started talking. Maybe you hit me up or something like that. But I was like, oh, that looks cool. So I've been following the development of your game very, very closely. Outside of that, I would not say I'm an expert on indie gaming for the arcade at all. But I wish I was. And we're going to look into that coming up because I think some of the titles that I've seen screenshots of or video of, I'm like, oh, you know what, that I do well. I can imagine, like a group of four people stood around, get friends or family just stood around having a good time playing that. Plus, it's a difference from a break from just playing. Oh, we're going to go play Pac-Man. Oh, we're going to go play Space Invaders. Oh, that kind of thing. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, there's definitely plenty of stuff for you to dive into in my
Sure.
space where I've covered these games, and
Hmm.
I think the thing that I love the most about it, and one of the funniest things that we've had happen is we were showing our game off in like 2018 maybe.
Hmm.
We were at a local arcade here uptown in Minneapolis, and these guys walked up. We were standing away so that nobody knew that we made the game. And this guy walks up. He's like, "Dude, I remember playing this when I was a kid. Like, you guys got to come over and play this." And I was like,
Right.
"Oh
Hmm.
yeah, you have memories from back then. This game's been
Good.
around for about 9 months now.
Yeah.
That's really
Very.
cool that you remember it." So,
You look
um,
pretty old for a 9 month year old, 9 month person.
right. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
I love seeing people see these games and they seem so familiar to them. I think that
Yeah.
that means we hit the mark. Obviously, if it seems so familiar.
I think so. I think when I was taking a look at your stuff that you sent me through, I was like, yeah, this could have come out in 1985. You know what I mean? But it
Hmm.
feels relevant today, and there's some mechanics in there. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, they wouldn't have had that back in 1985,
Right.
but it makes sense now. And so it's kind of going to be a good bridge, I think, between sort of like the younger audience and like the older guys or people. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap everything up. Shout out social medias and shout out anybody that you want to just say thank you to.
You know what? Social media for us is just Retrovolt Arcade, all one word. If you just that for Facebook, TikTok, Instagram is just Retrovolt Arcade. Shout out to, you know what, I'm going to give a shout out to a couple of local arcades here, if you don't mind. Big shout out to Neon Retro down in Pasadena. Mark and Mia are super cool people. I've lent on a little bit over the last few years, and I feel like they have for me. So it's a really good relationship. Then also Tracy and Sean out in San Bernardino with Revival Arcade, been around about a year now. They've got a great spot down there. Riverside Game Lab, close to us, fantastic pinball collection, and shouting those people out because the arcade scene here in the Inland Empire has just been growing, and they're, an essential part of it. And I think it's great to see. It's really good to see, in fact.
Yeah, I love support between communities. I mean,
Yeah,
we're not competing here. We're all together in this. And the nice thing is
no,
when you build these relationships with other arcades and there's a game you want, you get a deal from a friend, you make a good
yeah,
trade with a friend,
sure.
everybody wins in the end. So
Yeah,
we got to support each
absolutely.
other.
1,000%. Yeah, I could give you a quick story. Riverside Game Lab, when they were opening up, I was worried because they're like a bigger, massive place, and we'd only been open about a year or two. And I was like, oh man, this is going to kill us. No, it didn't kill us at all. Absolutely, we got busier. They got busier. We have people from there. They have people from here. And it was a little bit naive of me to think that at the time. But, you're like, oh, I'm invested in this and I want it to work. I think if you reach out to people or they reach out to you and you help each other out, it's only could be a good thing. And it's proven to be so. So shouts to
Just
them too.
just going to help the space grow in general for
For real.
everybody. I mean, you go to an arcade and you have a good time, you say, what else is near me? What
Yeah,
other
what else
arcades
is
can I
there?
check out? Because
Yeah.
every arcade's going to have a different selection, no matter how big or small they are. There's always going
Yeah,
to be something different.
even a different vibe. I walked into Revival Arcade for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and it took me back instantly. It felt like an arcade I would have walked into in like 1984 in the UK, and it was just a brilliant space, and the owners are really, really nice people too.
Awesome. I'm glad that there's some good stuff near you, and I want to say thank you, Bob, for coming on here. I really
Oh,
appreciate
thanks,
your
Joe.
time. I
No
like
problem.
hearing your story and how you start how everything happened. For anybody that's still watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us a ton. The wave will continue to grow, and we'll all ride it together. And like I said, we've got the new cabinets and the new T-shirts at the Galactic Battleground website, so go check those out. And we actually have the Indie Arcade Wave website coming soon. I can't
Sweet.
say when, but soon.
Tell us
Um,
when.
I don't know when yet. We're still working on it, but it's coming. But until
All right, man.
next time, peace.